Emily Carter lived a life that looked perfect from the outside, but inside she felt a quiet emptiness she could not ignore. She lived in a small white house just outside Seattle with her husband Daniel, an architect who was kind, dependable, and attentive in small ways, yet often distant because of long work hours. Their days were predictable. Daniel left early for work with a quick kiss. Emily worked remotely as a graphic designer, and evenings were spent quietly together, eating dinner, watching television, and talking about mundane things like bills or errands. The comfort of routine had replaced passion, and Emily began to feel a growing restlessness she couldn't explain. One evening, while scrolling through social media, she saw a post from her college friend Claire about a local creative workshop in downtown Seattle, a gathering for people who loved art, writing, and storytelling. The post lingered in her mind all night, sparking a curiosity she hadn't felt in years. On a quiet impulse, Emily decided to sign up, surprising herself with the sudden act of spontaneity. When she mentioned it to Daniel, he offered only a polite smile before returning to his work, leaving Emily with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The night of the workshop arrived, and Emily drove into the city feeling nervous but alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. The building was an old brick studio with warm lights, soft music, and people standing in small groups sharing ideas, painting, writing, and sketching, each person lost in their creative world. Emily felt a spark of excitement as she entered, a feeling she hadn't realized she missed. That's when she noticed Michael Hayes, a calm and confident freelance photographer, sketching the skyline in a notebook. His easy smile and quiet confidence drew her attention, and when she looked at his drawing, he laughed softly and made a casual comment about his work, breaking the ice. Emily found herself smiling back, feeling unexpectedly relaxed. They started talking, first about art, then about life, dreams, and the ways people drift from their true passions. Michael listened carefully to Emily, making her feel understood in a way she hadn't felt in years, and she realized how much she had missed emotional connection. Hours passed like minutes, and the evening ended too soon. Michael walked her to her car, chatting easily, and before they parted, he said something simple that lingered in her mind. "I'm glad you came tonight, Emily. You seem like someone who has a lot of stories inside her." The words stirred something deep within her, a mix of curiosity, excitement, and guilt. Driving home through the quiet city streets, the lights reflecting on the wet pavement, Emily felt a strange rush of emotion, realizing that stepping outside her predictable life had awakened feelings she had long ignored. When she returned home and lay beside Daniel as he slept, she stared at the ceiling, heart racing and mind swirling with possibilities. For the first time in years, she felt alive in a way that frightened and thrilled her at the same time. The workshop, the conversation with Michael, and the small thrill of trying something new had shifted something inside her, leaving her on the edge of change, aware that her life and her understanding of herself could never be the same again. This night marked the beginning of a journey, one that would challenge her emotions, her marriage, and her sense of self, all sparked by a single choice to step into something unknown, to take a risk that promised a chance to rediscover the person she had once been and the life she might still want. After that first workshop, Emily tried to return to her usual life, but she quickly realized she couldn't stop thinking about Michael. The memory of his easy smile, the way he listened to her, and the sense of understanding he gave her stayed in her mind, making her quiet home feel emptier than ever. A few days later, she received a message from him, simple and casual. "The studio is hosting another session next week. Thought you might want to come again?" Emily hesitated for a moment, telling herself it was just a friendly invitation, nothing more, but she found herself replying almost immediately. When the next workshop arrived, she walked into the room with more confidence, and the sight of Michael waiting near the window made her heart skip a beat. Their conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter, shared stories, and mutual curiosity about life, dreams, and the paths they had taken, ACV. Michael told her about his photography travels, cities he had visited, and people he had met, and Emily found herself opening up about the quiet emptiness she had felt in her marriage, the dreams she had set aside, and the longing for something more in her life. Each word exchanged between them created a bridge she hadn't realized she was craving, and Emily noticed that she looked forward to these moments more than she should, feeling alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. After each session, Michael would walk her to her car, and sometimes they lingered under the soft city lights, talking about books, childhood memories, and future possibilities, the conversations becoming more personal, more intimate in a way that stirred feelings Emily hadn't expected. She began to notice a growing contrast between the quiet, predictable life she shared with Daniel and the emotional energy she felt with Michael. Daniel was kind, attentive in practical ways, but their connection had become routine, predictable, and distant, whereas with Michael, every conversation seemed charged with warmth, curiosity, and understanding. One rainy evening, after another workshop, they sat together by the studio window, watching the city lights reflect on the wet streets, and Emily admitted something she had never said aloud. She felt like life had become smaller than she had imagined, that she had lost touch with parts of herself she didn't even realize were missing. Michael listened quietly, his gaze steady, and told her gently that sometimes all we need is someone to see us for who we really are, not just for the roles we play in daily life. Emily felt a mixture of relief, longing, and confusion. She had not expected anyone to understand her so completely, and it frightened her how much she wanted that connection to last. Over the following weeks, their friendship deepened. They shared stories, dreams, and ideas, supported each other's creative projects, and laughed easily, yet they remained careful, never crossing boundaries in actions, but allowing the emotional connection to grow steadily. At home, Emily began noticing the widening distance between herself and Daniel, realizing that their marriage had become functional rather than heartfelt. She felt guilty for her growing attachment to Michael, but she also felt alive in a way she hadn't for years, a sense of emotional intimacy she had longed for, but forgotten how to recognize. One night, after a particularly long walk and conversation with Michael, Emily drove home through the quiet streets, her mind racing with thoughts she could not easily dismiss. When she walked into the house, Daniel was asleep on the couch, television glowing softly, and she paused, feeling a wave of guilt mixed with the exhilaration of what she had just experienced. She realized that while nothing physical had happened between her and Michael, emotionally she had already crossed a line. She was sharing parts of herself, her dreams, and her vulnerability with someone outside her marriage, and it thrilled and terrified her at the same time. The following workshop, when Michael offered to walk her to her car, Emily felt the tension in the air between them, a quiet acknowledgement of the unspoken emotions growing with each meeting. He reassured her, saying he respected her marriage and her life, but Emily knew that their connection had become something neither of them could easily ignore. That night, lying awake beside Daniel, Emily realized the depth of what she felt. She cared for Michael in ways she hadn't felt for anyone in years, not in a casual way, but in an emotional, heartfelt way that made her question the life she had accepted as complete. She began to understand that her feelings were not a betrayal in action yet, but they reflected a truth she could no longer ignore. She had been craving emotional intimacy, understanding, and a sense of being truly seen, which had been missing from her predictable, comfortable life. As days passed, Emily's mind constantly drifted between the life she had built with Daniel, full of safety and history, and the exhilarating emotional connection she felt with Michael. She realized that trying something new, the workshop, the conversations, the friendship, had awakened something inside her that could not be silenced, forcing her to confront feelings she had long ignored. For the first time, Emily faced a quiet but powerful truth. She had two parts of herself coexisting, one content in routine, one hungry for emotional connection and passion, and neither could be ignored without consequence. She knew she had to make sense of these feelings, understand what they meant for her life, and decide how to honor both her marriage and the emotional awakening she had experienced. The story of her life was no longer predictable. It had shifted, and the choice she faced was no longer about comfort or habit, but about acknowledging who she truly was, what she needed, and whether she could reconcile the person she had become with the life she had already built. The workshops continued, but Emily began to realize that her journey was not about the activities themselves. It was about facing her heart honestly, understanding the emotions that had been buried beneath routine, and discovering that true connection could exist even in the quietest of lives if she had the courage to recognize it. By the end of part 2, Emily's life was full of tension and possibility, a delicate balancing act between familiarity and awakening, safety and desire, leaving her on the brink of choices that could change everything she had ever believed about herself.